day, everyone, and thank you so much for joining Charms Medi Helps Foundation. And this is what actually it's our third week. We had a little bit of accident last week, so we will be redoing last week's our special guest. We will be redoing her show in May, actually on May 8th. But for today's purposes, we do have another individual that I am so proud of. And I am, I can't ask God for any more blessings other than to keep, introducing me to people who are doing things not only for themselves, but for their communities. Our organization, as well as myself, we are so thankful that people actually take the time to say, hey, look, let me help you because we believe in what you're doing. And we also want to see our community, whether it's a community based on color, whether it's a community based on, the individual gender, or whether it's a community based on someone having a disability. Those three communities are so very important to Charms Medi Helps, and they're important because they represent who Sandra L. Washington is. So when people take the time to say, you know what, girl, I got you. We're going to do this. We're going to get the information out there. I can't help but be so very pleased with being able to reach them and with God being able to put them in my life and guide them and guide our conversation today. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to actually introduce our speaker for today. I'm going to let her introduce herself actually for today. I'm going to let her do the honors of introducing herself and introducing what she's talking about. It's really important, though, that we understand that not only is April Minority Month, it's also fetal health and maternal health month in the Black community. And so whenever you look at it and you're like, okay, well, why do they have to have a Black one? Like, what's all that about? Well, it's a reason for it. The statistics show us, and it's not that we just now are seeing it, but the statistics have shown us that we need to actually take care of our own. We need to actually promote the health and the quality of living for our own community before we can branch out and say, hey, okay, well, then let's do this together. There needs to be special attention placed on it. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and let the doctor take over. Thank you, Dr. Sylvester.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here with you and so grateful that you are allowing me to speak to your audience. Yes, my name is Katherine Sylvester. I am a physical therapist and have been for 14 years. And I started working with women a few years into my career when I realized that there were gaps in the way we were cared for. So there were women who were dealing with urinating, peeing on themselves. They were having pain with sex. They were having depression, issues with their confidence, difficulty losing weight, a lot of different things. And so I walked the journey with four of them for 15 weeks each and just found the places where, man, if a physical therapist had been there, they probably wouldn't even be where they are now. And so after a year of working with all of them, over a year, they were all in a much better place. And I thought, man, I could just do this, walk hand in hand with women and really teach them how to avoid some of these issues just by looking at things like their diet, exercise, the way they manage stress, their social interactions, their sleep quality. And so that started my journey into women's health. But then I had my sweet son, and I had him at home, and I really enjoyed every minute of it. And his birth, pregnancy, labor, delivery, everything was perfect. Flash forward to my daughter, and we get to about week 40, and my blood pressure started to go up. And my midwife said, Katherine, your baseline is 100 over 60. You're now at 128 over 78. Let's look into this. And that's different, right? Because with protocol, it would have said, well, wait till it gets to 140 over 90 to see what's going on. That's what I hear a lot of women saying. Their doctors are waiting for their blood pressure to get that high. But the problem is that when you compare people to standards and then treat them based on protocol, things can be missed. And so luckily my midwife didn't miss it because she was looking at me as an individual. And I thought, man, what if I had been tracking other things. So not just blood pressure, but what about heart rate, oxygen saturation, sleep quality, heart rate variability, which is a measure of stress? Would I have run into this complication of pregnancy called preeclampsia, or could I have avoided it? And so I decided to write a grant, and I won the grant and sent 40 watches all over the country, monitored women for free throughout every phase of their pregnancy and through the first year post delivery. And we were able to catch things like anemia, bleeding too much following delivery, so hemorrhage. And we were able to catch when they had COVID or other types of infection, when they were really not too tired to stay pregnant, because they would be told, your body is just so tired. You need to go ahead and let us induce, or we need to go ahead and have a C-section. And women were able to take their data and say, no, you know what? My body is actually fine. Is it okay if I stay pregnant? These women who were going to be induced at 39 weeks actually ended up having healthy babies at 41 and a half weeks. And so it was just, it was a realization that if we make data-driven decisions, we can have healthier pregnancies. We can catch issues between office visits, because it's not just about we're going to the doctor month to month, and then every 2 weeks, and then every week. But women are with themselves 100% of the time. So when we look at the deaths that are taking place, and the CDC says that 80% of them are preventable, my thing is, why not put tools in the hands of women so that they can catch issues between office visits and have them addressed as minor issues before they turn into major complications? And so that's how Operation M.I.S.T was birthed. And we send women smart devices. We have them use the devices that they already have, like pulse oximeters, blood pressure cuffs, thermometers, and smart devices like this, glucose readers, and let them see what is the data saying and what can I do in my lifestyle to improve, in my day-to-day life, to improve the data. Because if we can do that, we show up to pregnancy healthier, we show up to delivery healthier, and we recover better following delivery. And so that's what I do in my remote monitoring role. And then as a physical therapist, of course, I'm in person with the ladies and making sure that they're truly recovering well. If they have tears, if they have back pain, if they are leaking on themselves, and I still do that as well. But that's what I'm doing at this point in my career, and it's truly gratifying.
And I have a question as you're talking, and I'm sitting here writing, taking some notes. One of the things that drives me is the fact that when we look at data driven anything, right? We have to be careful about the systems that we're getting that data from, because so many times so many times that system is skewed, right? Especially if it's more than two systems, right? You're using 4 or 5 systems to gather data from different people from different places. It's a tendency to have that data not be okay, right? Even though, well, the common thing is, well, I got to use it because I have it. But in reality, you shouldn't be using it because it's not accurate. So is there like, how do we get around making sure that the data that's being collected, especially when it comes down to the underserved community, how do we do how do we make that data stand, right? How do we do that?
I love that you asked that, because a lot of people will ask me, well, when do you reach out? What makes you reach out to a person? What level does their stress have to get to? How low does their oxygen need to get? How bad does their sleep quality need to get? And the answer is, it depends. And so we are literally keeping the ratio so low so that we can get to know each woman as an individual. And so, for example, we caught hemorrhage in a woman while she was still in the hospital. So she's in the hospital. And because we knew that her resting heart rate never got above, her heart rate never got above 120, whether she was walking during her pregnancy, showering, like anything that she was doing throughout the day, never made it to 120. So when it was consistently in the 160s, we knew that something was wrong. And so comparing women only to themselves is the answer to me. We know our own baseline. We know the mom's baseline. And so if we can teach her what her baseline is, then anytime she deviates from that, she can look back at her activity and say, did I do anything different yesterday that could have resulted in this data change? And if the answer is yes, then we fix that. So let's say her blood pressure goes up. Then we're saying, okay, well, did you eat out yesterday? Yes, I ate at Carrabba's. This happened with one of our moms. She ate at Carrabba's. We had decided with her for her entire pregnancy, she was not going to eat at Carrabba's because that was the one thing that shot her blood pressure up. And so she went to her doctor's office and he was like, look, we're gonna have to have a C-section. Your blood pressure's through the roof. So she's calling me, she's crying. And I said, well, what did you do before you saw the doctor? And she was like, oh, Katherine, I went to Carrabba's. I said, okay, so now we're gonna drown ourselves in water. We're gonna take our blood pressure again, and then we're gonna call him back so we don't have an unnecessary C-section, right? And so it's really just about awareness. If we can make women aware of their own bodies, then they don't have to worry about any of the standards that are out there. Because the problem is, it's like you said, certain populations are being surveyed, and then they're applying all of that data to everyone. And it should not be applied to everyone. It should be applied to the population where it fits, not even the population of people who fell under the category of that researched population. It is, how is the person sitting in front of me responding to the intervention that I'm giving to them or that I'm suggesting. And so that's what we're noticing. As women become more aware, they make different choices. If they see, wow, my stress is through the roof when I'm on the road for an hour going to work, they are calling their employers and saying, hey, is it okay if I work remotely 3 times a week? Because I'm noticing that it's hurting the safety of my pregnancy. And believe it or not, the employers are like, sure, okay, you think you're going to work better from home as long as you're still producing in the same way, then we're fine with that. So I think it really is if we're using data to make better decisions for everyone, that's one thing. But what I'm noticing is data is used for some people's convenience. And so what we need to do is have our own data on ourselves, and then we're our own research project, right? I know if I walk and I get 7 to 9 hours of sleep at night and I stop eating at 7:30 at night, I'm going to wake up refreshed. My stress is going to be low. My blood pressure is going to be low. I've already figured that out about me. And so what we do is in community, we do that for each other. We drop our goals into the group. We hold each other accountable for them, because once we see what makes our data better, which means what makes our health better, then we just stick with it. I think the issue for me is that women are dying of heart disease in the United States, right? 20, 30, 40 years after they've had children, and nobody's making the link to the fact that during pregnancy, our hearts work so much harder than they do outside of pregnancy for at least half of the pregnancy. And so you see women who end up dying 4 days after they've delivered from heart complications. And I don't know if you want me to go into this yet, but the top 4 reasons that women are dying can all be tracked on a smart device. So they're dying of infection, they're dying of heart problems, they're dying of suicide, which that issue, of course, can be fixed more so in community, right? If we're just not doing birth and motherhood in silo, that we have other people around us to help us to support, the birth environment, the motherhood environment, then it would be a whole lot easier. You think about someone who's a single mom who's taken their child to and from newborn appointments, and they're also having to do stuff for themselves, still doing the grocery shopping, cooking, cleaning, bathing, and taking care of the younger children. Her heart is going to be working harder than someone who is in a 2-parent household where the partner is actually engaged, where they can do some of the running around for the other kids. Like, her heart is just going to be working harder. And in the first couple weeks following delivery, our bodies do not adjust to that well. And so we have to figure out, how do we cocoon women and protect them during this time so that they have better outcomes? Because suicide is a big deal. And then the fourth thing is blood loss. We're bleeding too much following delivery. And we have to be able to recognize the signs, right? So that's why I like the pulse oximeter. That's why I like the smart device that tells you what your heart rate is, because when you're bleeding too much, your body is going to compensate. Your heart rate is going to go up because now there is less blood available to deliver oxygen. So the heart is going to pump faster so that your body gets everything that it needs. So if I'm at home and I'm recognizing that, wow, my heart rate is really, really high, blood pressure will typically tank at some point, they can call in and get help as opposed to staying home and dying. We had a mom 2 days after she delivered, we were watching her data, and that very thing happened. Heart rate was up really high when she was making a baby bottle. And I was like, look, I know you don't want to go back to the hospital, but because we have a relationship, she understands that we've been doing this together for a year now. Before you got pregnant, we were monitoring you all the way throughout your pregnancy. So if we say you have to go in, you have to go in. And so she ended up going in 2 days following delivery, and they ended up detecting the fluid overload that her doctor said could have turned into complete heart failure had she stayed home for 3 weeks. So he gave her 3 weeks to live had she not gone in at day 2. And so there are just things that if we're watching, I think people can detect it themselves, of course, if they're trained in what to look for. But also, it's just sometimes women don't look. They're tired, they're sleepy, like they're occupied with their newborn. So it's nice to have eyes on them. They're connected to a healthcare provider 24/7, and we can reach out when we see how their data deviates from what's normal for them, and then intervene before things get out of hand.
And that's the excellent thing. I'm a big stickler with collaboration. And it doesn't make a difference who's collaborating, right? It could just be you and I collaborating, such as we're doing tonight. It could be you and I and a whole group of other people that are collaborating, right? It's just a collaboration factor that's so important to making sure that we push ahead. We move ahead, and we shouldn't even have to push. We should be able to walk with our heads held up high, knowing that we have somebody there that is willing to collaborate with us and say, hey, I have this that can help you. Let me help you, right? Standing on the island by yourself, especially, with African American women as they go through childbirth, knowing what the outcomes are, knowing what the data does say, the factual data does say, just from one source, right? I mean, the ironic thing about data in the when we're looking at the African American woman and the mortality and the pregnancy, right? Every study says just about the same thing, right?
Yes.
Every study.
Mhm.
So yeah, we can't pull from, multiple studies, but we could take a look at the studies to see what the studies are saying. And across the board, the studies are saying no matter who does the studies are all coming up with the same thing, that there's the infant mortality in the African American race. The women that are not getting the correct, type of and amount of maternal care, right? It's a need for it to grow. You can't wait until, and unfortunately in our community we do it a lot. We can't wait until we get pregnant and then get
Mhm.
help. We need to be looking out before we get pregnant and saying, okay, well, at some point in time, I do want to have a baby. I do want to give birth. What are the things that I need to do? I mean, I know I'm asking for a lot, right? But I mean, if someone was to say, Sandra, when it comes down to your wish list on what it is you want your child, how it is you want your child to, or how it is that you want the maternal field to look like, that's what I would say. I want us to learn early, right? Our kids, our babies, right, are having sex younger and younger every year. So, I mean, the concept of collaboration, and there are tools out there and there are things out there that you can use. While a lot of people might be like, yeah, but that's too early to start teaching them. But really, it's not, especially when they're having babies at that age. I often look back at my own son. He's 30 now, but I often look back at him. He was born with a heart defect. He had an ASD and a VSD. So he had a hole in his upper and he had a hole in his lower, right? Well, when I was pregnant, and as I hear more and more, when I was pregnant, my heartbeat, when they went to listen to the baby with the stethoscope, it was always fast. And I happened to be at church with someone, and they was like, "Well, if your baby's heartbeat is fast, that means you having a girl. If it's slow, it means you having a boy." So I had an African American doctor, and I said to her, I said, "Well, my baby's heartbeat is fast. That means I'm having a girl." So I kid you not, I went out, and I was living with my oldest sister at the time. I went out, Dr. Sullivan. I brought all little girl stuff, Dr. Sylvester, all little girl stuff. My sister said, when you had that baby, if it's a boy, you're going to take all that stuff back to the store, right? She said, because you don't know what you're having, right? But, and I had a boy, and I had to stand in line, I had to take all that stuff back. And she babysat for me while I did it. It's like, I told you, even when I had my baby shower, it's so funny because even the people that came to my baby shower asked me, they were like, well, Sandra, do you know what you have? And then I'm like, yeah, I'm having a girl. And I was, so my baby shower, I had a bunch of pink, like I had like a girl's baby shower, right? I love my son. I love him to death. I couldn't ask God for a better son, but I promise you, it was a girl. And so now when I look back on it though, I'm like, someone should have been able to say then, is
Yeah.
something going on that needs to be monitored. That's not what was said to me. That's not what was told to me. And I was not a teenager. I had him when I was in my 20s, but it's just the fact that there's so much that we don't know. And
Yes.
it's so much, with social media now, there's so much that we can learn and that we should be learning, right? We should be sitting down with our young ladies, our girls that are in grammar school, and having these conversations with them so that they understand and they know what exactly it is that's going on. So to have doctors like you that not only do come up with these devices, you see a problem and you're like, I want to fix this problem, right? And you go about fixing the problem, not just for communities in St. Louis, right? And I'm not sure where you live at, but not just for the communities in St. Louis, but you did a national grant. You said, I don't want to just study where I'm at. I want to be able to go into all areas where there's a problem and I want to be able to address it. So to have doctors like you, because so many times, we hear so many times, well, the doctor this and the doctor that, but there's some good doctors that really do care and want the best for those that they care about. They want the best because they've been there and they have lived experiences. So I'm so just grateful to you that you came up with Operation Mist. And I do want to tell you before we go forward, if there's something that you want to say, Dr. Sylvester, please say it. And I'm telling you that for a reason. You're the senior subject matter expert on this, right? I mean, I have my personal lived experience. I have my own feelings, my own thoughts, but we got to move past our own feelings and our own thoughts. It's time for us to actually get busy with putting the facts out there and making sure that patients know that not only do they know what the facts are, but that they understand what those facts are, right? We could talk all we want to, but at the end of the day, those patients who these devices are for or these systems are for, do they understand? Because if they don't understand and break it down to the level where they do understand it, you gotta go back to third grade, put it in third grade language so that they do understand it and that we all get it so that we can all move ahead. So please, by all means, as you're talking, don't worry about, well, maybe she don't want me to say that. Tell it because it needs to be told. Right? No more hand holding and yeah, come on, I'm gonna show you. Yeah, we gotta move past that. We really do. So I am
Mhm.
going to let you actually tell us a whole lot more about Operation Miss.
Okay. So first of all, I love so many things that you said. And in terms of my lived experience, I told you my midwife caught my blood pressure increase. But what happened following delivery was I was assigned to another provider because when things don't go quite as expected, they'll turn over your care. So I'm in Georgia. And so the guy who got me afterwards, over the course of a couple of visits, he actually said, "You're Black. You lived most of your life in the South. You probably had high blood pressure before you got pregnant. Your kidneys will never recover. You'll be on high blood pressure medicine for the rest of your life. And on the off chance that I'm wrong, your body's not fit for having another child." So this is what he's telling me. And so you think about what that does to a person who is not a healthcare provider. They're going to take the blood pressure medicine. They're going to believe that this is their state of life.
Hmm.
And it would be a bleak outlook. So it's just a downward spiral if you internalize the things that are said to you. And I share that because when you talked about collaboration, at that point I realized that he is not on my team. So we have to start thinking as women. If I was playing basketball when I was 13, I get to choose who's on my team. There are a bunch of people, and then each team captain gets to choose who they want. And I feel like as women, we have to start being picky about who's on our team. And so I realized that I needed him. It was COVID. I needed him to continue to draw my labs. He needed to continue to give me these numbers, but that was all I needed him for. I self recruited a dietitian, a kidney doctor. A good friend of mine is a pharmacist. Another friend got trained as in obstetrics and gynecology, but decided not to go that route. So I got her on my team, and then I got a physical therapist to monitor my data on the smart device, so that it wasn't just me looking at it. It was more than one person, because initially the device was sent to me because they were doing a study to see, can we detect COVID using wearable devices? And I started noticing that I would walk a tenth of a mile and the watch would start alerting me that my stress was high. And I would eat cucumbers, tomatoes, boiled eggs, things that you think are healthy foods, but they were actually messing with my blood pressure. And so that's how I was clued in on the fact that I needed a kidney doctor on my team. And so I created the team that could help me thrive. And I think that's part of what women need to understand. You have access to healthcare providers. I self referred. I did not have to wait on him to write me an order. I didn't have to go to my primary care doctor. I called them up myself and I said, hey, I need you. And they were like, come on in. And so we have to start recruiting the people we need. The other thing that you see when you said about treating young girls, talking to young girls, I started these parties last year. They're called More Than a Period parties, where we go to young ladies. And I wrote a grant for it because I thought, how will this work in the community? How will it work in a college setting? And so we tested both. The outcome was so beautiful. Teaching young girls really about their bodies, and we'll just talk about this briefly, but sometimes when girls are taught when they're younger and they start bleeding, they're told by their mom, circle on the calendar maybe when you start, or circle the days when you're bleeding. And then they circle the next month the days that they're bleeding. So they go from cycle to cycle, only really focusing on the time that they're bleeding. Well, that's only the first phase of our cycles. And so we have these women showing up to pregnancy unplanned, but I think it's because they never knew how to track their cycles properly in the first place. So after the first phase of bleeding, the next phase is that there are these eggs that are inside of a shell and they're trying to break out of the shell. So hormones are increasing to get the egg out of the shell. That happens for a few days up until you release an egg. Well, that phase only lasts for 12 to 24 hours. So the egg is only alive 12 to 24 hours. So these women are on birth control all the time, thinking I can get pregnant all the time, and you really can't. Sperm can live in our bodies for up to 5 days. Some studies will say 7. So I'm conservative. So I'm like 5 to 7 days. And so, yes, if you have sex 5 to 7 days before your body releases an egg, you can still get pregnant if the environment is right. But after that, there are some, you can check your cervix position. So the cervix is the doorway between our womb where the baby is and our vaginal opening. And so there's a cervix there, it's like a door. And so after you release an egg and the egg is no longer viable, you can no longer get pregnant. You can actually reach inside and see, okay, is my cervix low? Is my fluid dry? And so once you know those things, then I can't get pregnant after this point. So if we teach women truly how to use their cycle, how to track what's coming out of their vagina, so their cervical fluid, where their cervix actually is, position wise. Is it high? Is it medium? Is it low? You are tracking the bleeding, of course, but it's one part of it. And so if we would teach all 4 phases and really teach women about their bodies, not only can they prevent themselves from getting pregnant or get pregnant when they want to get pregnant, but they can also at that point take over their bodily autonomy. Women, when they're younger, when they're put on birth control at 14 because they're bleeding really, really heavy, they never know why they're bleeding really, really heavy. So when they're 26 years old and they're trying to get pregnant and they've been on birth control from the time they were 14, that's 12 years of their bodies not going through that cycle that we just talked about. Every cycle is an opportunity to produce life, right? And so if your body's not gone through that cycle, then it's very unrealistic for you to expect that I come off of birth control at 26, I'm gonna get pregnant at 26 years old in 1 month. And so now when women are not getting pregnant that soon, then they're thinking, wow, something is wrong with me. We've set them on the wrong path from the beginning. Teach them about their bodies. Teach them why it's important to not, have STDs, unprotected sex, how that can impact their ability to have a baby later on, how abortions can change their body, how the scar tissue can change their bodies. If we're having those conversations, then they'll be able to make educated decisions. Because what happens when they show up to pregnancy then is that when someone says, hey, do this, do that, they just do it because that's the pattern that they had from the time they were 14. So we really need to start teaching them early so that they show up to parenthood more prepared. And when I think about preparation and in the labs that women should know, a lot of them are not included in our annual physicals, right? We're told to go to the doctor every year. But some of the things that we really should be tracking before we get pregnant and preparing for, we're not. And so I want to share some of those labs with the people listening today. If you're trying to get pregnant, there are some numbers you should know. One, it's not a lab, it's your resting heart rate. So how many times does your heart beat in a minute when you're completely at rest? Smart devices can track that, but you can also check it on your wrist. So you could just sit for 5 minutes, or when you wake up in the morning, you can track your heart rate. You could put something called a pulse oximeter on your finger. You can know your resting heart rate. The lower the resting heart rate, the better. And so, as a physical therapist, we're trying to teach people how to get their heart rates down. And that's through exercise, because the heart does work harder during pregnancy. The idea is that if you get it to where it's not working so hard outside of pregnancy, then the resting heart rate will rise a little bit slower during pregnancy. So your heart is not working as hard. So that's one of the numbers, resting heart rate. We also want to know our hemoglobin. So hemoglobin carries and delivers oxygen. That's its job. And during pregnancy, hemoglobin is expected to go down because we have to share resources with our babies. And so if we start out with pregnancy and we have a low hemoglobin, that is actually linked by research to complications in the third trimester. So anemia, low hemoglobin, low oxygen, is linked to preeclampsia, which is something that really plagues our community. And so if we just go in knowing, hey, my iron is low, then we can take iron supplements. We can talk to our doctors so that they can give us iron supplements. The other thing is that women are taking prenatals that are gummies. Gummies do not have iron. And so our bodies need iron during pregnancy, at least 30 milligrams. People say between 26 and 30 milligrams. So let's say 30 milligrams of iron. And so if we're taking a prenatal gummy, like I was, and you don't know that it doesn't have iron, you're setting yourself up for a problem. So my midwife detected my low hemoglobin at 32 weeks. And so I was well into my pregnancy before she realized that my hemoglobin levels were low. And so why not just check that at the very before we get pregnant and see what it is? And that way we know if we need iron supplements, we can bring it up to our providers. There were things called race-based protocols that were in place, and just, I think it was 2 years ago that this one got revealed. And it was that white women, once their hemoglobin dropped to 11, they were given intervention. But doctors would wait until Black women's hemoglobin was 10.2. And so if you have a provider who's still operating off of those old protocols, you could be at risk for things going wrong because you didn't know. So you check your own hemoglobin, because the reason we're dying again is that we're bleeding too much following delivery. So you would think we want a woman to have more blood because we know that she's going to lose more blood when she delivers her baby, right? The other thing is that C-sections, when women have C-sections, they bleed double the amount that you bleed if you have a vaginal delivery. And so while people are signing up for C-sections now, they think it's convenient that you'll avoid a lot of the complications that you have when you have a vaginal delivery. The reality is that C-sections come with their own risk. And so imagine now you're anemic, so you have low hemoglobin, low blood levels already, and then following delivery, you lose double the amount because you had a C-section delivery. And Black women, according to some research from about 2019, are 24% more likely to have a C-section delivery than white women. And so we have to start advocating for ourselves. If nothing is wrong with me, nothing is wrong with the baby, I am not signing up for a C-section, because the likelihood that I will bleed more is higher And we don't need to have that issue compounded on top of the fact that people are bleeding too much anyway. And so that's another value. GFR and creatinine, those are two values that tell you about your kidney function. So the kidneys also work 50% harder during pregnancy, starting at about week 20, all the way through the second week following delivery. So the kidneys are still working harder even after we deliver our babies. So knowing those two values can give us an idea of where are we starting with pregnancy with our kidney function. What happened in my family history that could potentially have impacted my kidneys? Like, we don't know that sometimes to look into it. And a lot of people think about the kidneys as getting rid, they make urine, it gets rid of toxins, but the kidneys also help to make hemoglobin. So they release a hormone that's used to create hemoglobin. And so if the kidneys are not functioning properly, we're starting out at a deficit. The other thing they do is they regulate blood pressure. And so high blood pressure is a huge complication of pregnancy, not only in our community, but it's killing people, right? And so if we can get the kidneys where they need to be before we get pregnant, that'll be a good place to start. The other thing is the kidneys thrive on water. And so we have to start really taking care of ourselves, hydrating well. When people say you really need to drink water, your body needs water, I really like to explain the body really needs water. The kidneys don't function well without it. And so if we want to manage our blood pressure, we got to start drinking more, hydrating better. The other numbers that I think we should know is something called a hemoglobin A1C. So a lot of people will get their fingers pricked and then they get the number and it tells them if they're at risk for diabetes or if they have high blood sugar levels. But the hemoglobin A1C really gives you a better insight into how your body manages the sugar that's floating around. The reason why this is important with pregnancy, though, is that during pregnancy, there is also a hormone that is released to protect our babies. And so the hormone is released, it allows sugar to stay in the bloodstream longer. So if you start out with pregnancy, being pregnant, and you already have a hard time managing sugar, it's going to be even harder because the body is preserving the sugar for the baby. So your insulin, your glucose levels, your sugar levels will be higher in your bloodstream. And it's the body's job to get rid of the excess. But if it already has a hard time doing that, then we're at risk for something called gestational diabetes. So having high blood sugar during pregnancy that wasn't a problem before you got pregnant. The problem with gestational diabetes, besides the fact that it can shoot your blood pressure up and cause other complications within the mom, is that baby can grow too fast. And so if baby grows too fast, the first recommendation is for her to have a C-section so the baby doesn't get too big, right? And so if we can teach people how to manage their blood sugar levels before they get pregnant, that would be ideal. So what we could do is have a dietitian on board. If you have a hemoglobin A1C that is abnormal, you can have a dietitian on board. You can get on the medications that you need to get on. Walking helps to regulate blood sugar. And so if we're walking every day, it helps the body to manage blood sugar better. So those are just things that we can do practically before we ever get pregnant. Think about getting pregnant. Let's address our blood pressure, our sugar levels, our blood levels. And the last thing is our sleep quality that I want to address here. Sleep quality is associated with better health outcomes. It's also associated with better birth outcomes. And so sometimes we have young girls in college. This is a great time to talk to them about sleeping. When I was in college, I do not think that I slept very. I was studying so much. I would go to the 24-hour study room and study until the morning and then go straight to class. And so it was not a good practice, right? I didn't know that. No one told me that. I just figured it's only for 4 years. I can make it through this. But then I got to grad school and did the same thing for the next 3 years. That's 7 years of my life that I went without good sleep quality. Our bodies depend on sleep. Every system that works in our body works best when we have a good night of sleep. And by good night of sleep, I mean your devices are off 30 minutes before you go to bed. You're not eating about 2 hours before you go to bed. You're in complete darkness if you can tolerate it. I know some people, from a trauma standpoint, may not be able to tolerate sleeping in complete darkness, and that's fine. Maybe using an eye mask to shut out the extra light, having a cool room. I know I like the room hot, but when I check my data is better when I have a cool room. So that's just setting the environment for good sleep, because that allows the heart time to rest. It allows blood sugar levels to regulate themselves and then it allows you the next day to not be as hungry and to not want as many things that are not good for you. Our bodies work on a system of day, and night. And if we're constantly mixing up day and night, our hormones are not going to know what to do. And that's true too when someone is trying to get pregnant. The hormones that regulate our ability to get pregnant, to reproduce, they function best when we've had a full night of sleep. And so we have to start prioritizing sleep again in our society. Sometimes when people are like, man, I have to get something up, I really have to do something important, they sacrifice sleep. And so we get women to track their temperature. And the only way you can get an accurate temperature reading to try to stop yourself from getting pregnant or see if you can, if you're producing, or if you're, I mean, I'm sorry, if you're releasing an egg, is to take your temperature. But you have to be sleeping for at least 5 consecutive hours to do it. So we get women in the habit of sleeping at least 5 hours a night, even though ideal would be 7 to 9, right? If we can start out just by prioritizing sleep, then we can have better health outcomes. So those are some of the things that I think showing up to pregnancy healthy, that's what that looks like. Are we hydrating well? Are we moving? It doesn't have to be running every day. It can be walking, yoga, Tai Chi, um, just any type of exercise that you make up, circuit training. Some of the things that overwork our systems, I'm realizing, are things like HIIT workouts and the boot camps that people go to. Sometimes people look, when they look at their stress on their watch, they realize they may have worked out for an hour, but it takes them 5 hours to recover from that. That's too much. And so we don't want to go too far into what we consider to be fitness, so far into that we ignore what our body is telling us. And then managing stress. I feel like it is so important to manage the things that cause us stress, whether it's other people, the job that we're going to, our financial situations. With Operation M.I.S.T, the thing that I love the most and that I realized, the need I realized first, was that I could reach out to someone and tell them that their sleep quality was bad. But if the reason was because they're sleeping on a floor and I can't get them a mattress, then them having that information does nothing for them. And so when you talk about community, it is, yeah, we need healthcare providers, but we also need to partner with nonprofits who meet some of these needs. If someone's at 7 months pregnant and they've never been to a doctor to check on their baby, that is not a good thing. So we need to partner with people who give transportation vouchers so that they can use Ubers and Lyfts to get back and forth to their doctor's appointments, so they can get back and forth to work. If we have someone who is unemployed, we had a lady, and this really opened my eyes. I sit on a board for PSI Georgia. It's called Postpartum Support International. And we support the mental health of families of women because we don't want them to run into suicide or to want to hurt themselves or hurt their babies. And so I sit on this board, and it's an amazing, amazing organization. And when I came on, I made it clear, like, I don't want people to have access to counseling services. I want them to never have to run into mental health issues in the first place. And this mom came to us, a tornado came through her area. She lost her house. A couple weeks later, lost her car because she couldn't get to and from work, lost her job. And then the next day found out she was pregnant. That is a mental health disaster waiting to happen. And so I was like, okay, I've made enough relationships in this area that we're going to get her a job. We're going to get her secure housing, because if she gets a job now, by the time she has the baby, she'll have maternity leave, right? If we get her a job now, she'll be able to pay for all the things that her children need, and she won't have the stress that could possibly put her into labor prematurely. And so it's like, how do we get really, really far upstream and as a community provide the environment for birth to be safe? We need people to have access to good food, safe housing, clothing, diapers, wipes, job, financial security, childcare. I mean, you go to the doctor now, you have 3 kids and you're a single mom. They're like, okay, we got to take the other two to child protective services because we don't allow them in the hospital. So we don't even let women run into that. We're finding childcare for them before they get to their 40-week appointment and are told that they have to induce their baby that same day. And so I think it really just is, can we help women show up prepared from a health standpoint, but also from a lifestyle, from an environment standpoint? Because if you're in a neighborhood and right next door to you, a 12-year-old got shot and killed by a stray bullet, you don't feel safe. And when you don't feel safe, your system, your body system is not going to calm down enough for you to have a safe and healthy birth. And so it's about everything that surrounds a woman, not just looking at the pregnancy, but looking at what type of environment is she carrying in and what type of an environment will she live in afterwards.
And I so thank you for all of that you just said. I mean, and it's real. You holistically, right? We have to stop splitting it and saying, okay, well, the mental health is more than the physical health, or the physical health is more than the mental health, because truly, mental health, I mean, health is health, right? And a lot of times we run into an issue when we say, okay, well, this person has a mental health issue, or this person has a physical health issue, and we split them up. And so it gets hard to try to decipher which one should come first. When we, instead of thinking in silos, we should be thinking holistically. How can we solve this issue holistically? And for such a long time, my organization, as well as the organizations that I would collaborate with, and I still collaborate with, I'm saying to everybody, I just came from a meeting yesterday, and I'm like, all of this is good. Like I mean, the meeting was about direct care, the new model of direct care, which really isn't new, but I mean, okay, you want to put a DCP on it and call it something else, that's fine, right? But we're having these meetings and we're talking about patients, and we're not explaining to the patients what it is we're talking about. I had a conference last year. I had the foundation do a conference last year because I got tired of sitting in meetings and I'm using these big words and I'm hearing these words that at one point in time was something else. Now they've changed it. Like the government has just taken it and played, like literally dropped carrots in front of our eyes. Like those of us that don't know won't know. But if you do know because you've been in the field for such a long time, you know that that used to be called this. Now it's being called that, right? And so it gets hectic. And I'm like, let me find out what the patients need to know. Like, what I'm doing, is it making any difference? And how I'm doing it, is it making any difference? Am I teaching or educating and empowering you and engaging you in your own healthcare process so that you, as a patient, become more attuned to what's going on, right? The health literacy blew my mind. And it wasn't so much even the attendees at the conference, but even some of the doctors that I talk to nowadays. And they don't want to say anything because they don't, and this happened in a meeting I was at last night. They don't want to say anything because they don't want to look like they're not human. But we're all human, right? We all have to walk that human line. We all have to start breaking it down and talking and doing things that need to be done on a holistic level. We have to stop taking it and saying, okay, well, if we fix this today, then tomorrow or next week or whatever, because by then it's lost, right? It's lost. And so it's really important that we begin to, all parties. I tell people all the time, we're all stakeholders, right?
Yeah.
Patients are stakeholders, the doctors are stakeholders, everybody's insurance companies are stakeholders, the government is another stakeholder. We got all of these stakeholders, right? And each of us are on our own path. But at some point in time, we all have to sit at that same table and start deciding, discovering and deciding how we can make it better. But we cannot do it if we continue to leave the patient off the table and say, I'm talking for the patient. Patient got their own voice. They got their own mouth. We got to teach the patient, each of them, the importance of their mouth, the importance of them speaking up and saying what's wrong. How do we fix this? What can we do? Like you said, Dr. Sylvester, when it comes down to your medical team, I've literally had to know, and I had to do it twice. It bothered me, but I had to do it. I had a doctor. She wanted to play in the sandbox by herself. Okay, well, I'm gonna leave you in the sandbox by yourself, and I'm gonna get somebody that I'm gonna go and get me a medical team that works for me. We have
Yeah.
to start teaching patients, especially in African American, especially women. And I say women because of the fact that we care for ourselves, we care for our children, we care for our other significant other, we care for our community. But we as women, we have to stop, and say, this medical team isn't working for me. I need to get someone else. As I tell people all the time, if you're not doing what your doctor tells you to do, they will send you a note, a letter, and say, we suggest that you go somewhere else, right? Because
Yeah.
because you're being non-compliant. But the patient really isn't being non-compliant. They just don't understand, right? They just have no knowledge of what's going on around them, and nobody's teaching them how or what to say, right? We're just talking around them. So they look non-compliant. And what happens is that, and they throw that word, non-compliant. And what happens a lot of times is that patients will have that stuff put in their medical records, and they won't go back and read their medical records. And then when they go to another doctor and they feel like, well, this doctor ain't treating me right. Well, that's because your records already got to the doctor's office. Your records
Or
on
you
your
did.
phone, or your records, or a phone call, or something has happened to make them treat you like that. But in relations to maternal health, you're going to the doctor because you're pregnant and you're being treated some kind of way. One, I have a very good associate, Dr. Bianca. Well, she's not a doctor, she's a lawyer, Bianca, that will say, you're black. Don't you ever forget that. You're black. I mean, you can be the richest black person on earth, but you're black at the end of the day, right? That plays a role, and you've said it, and so many others have said it, that we've got to come together as a community and say, let us help, especially those of us that are in a position to help. Let us
Mhm.
help, right? A lot of times the younger generation don't want to hear it from us, but we still have to continue to at least try to help, right? We never know who it is that we will be able to help, but we gotta stay on that path where we're trying, right? And so I thank you so much for actually even bringing into the conversation the fact that we have to providers, no, we have to reach out to those community organizations that are in the communities, and they're doing the work. Like they're meeting with the people, and they're talking to the people, and they're getting the stuff done because we need them. Like we really, our organization, we love talking to people, love getting out there and saying stuff and doing stuff. As you know, I've been with a cough for the past 2 weeks, but that's because I'm always running my mouth, right? I mean, don't get me somewhere where you're saying something negating the black community, or negating a woman, or negating someone that has some type of disability. Because while I'm being told to be quiet, I'm going to keep talking because somebody needs to hear what it is that I have to say. So I so thank you for bringing that up and saying, yeah, we need to reach out. We need to get with these community organizations, and we need to be like, okay, well, how, can you help us get our point across? So I thank you for that. Now, I do want to ask you, as far as the watch, it's a watch, correct? It's a smart device. Now, how does a woman get the smart device? Say they're interested in, like, okay, well, I heard about this device and I really want to get it. Where do they go to get it?
So they can get it on Amazon. We actually use a couple of different devices. The one that I love the most is the Garmin Vivo Smart 4. But the thing that happens is once they open the app, then the information goes to a cloud, and then it comes to the computer screen of healthcare providers. So we can see their data all day long and can reach out when it changes. And so they get the watch from Amazon, but the app is what displays it in a way that we're able to see what changes are taking place. And so it's neat because as soon as they sync it, it comes over. And so if someone, for instance, a couple of days ago, she was bleeding, and she was 7 weeks pregnant at the time. And so she was told, well, you got to wait. Your appointment is at week 12, week 10, week 12. And I said, no, you need to go into an ER. If your doctor is not going to take you early, even though you're bleeding, you need to go in to be seen. They discovered a subchorionic bleed, which is where you have a bleed between where the baby's supposed to attach to the mom and the mom, essentially. And so if there is something separating the baby from the mom, then in theory, the mom could miscarry. And so research, the most recent research is saying that there is not a higher risk of miscarrying, but what they're finding is that there are other complications that could be associated with it. And at the end of the day, women are bleeding during their first trimester. And it's scary, right? Like
Hmm.
you do not associate bleeding with pregnancy normally. And so what we want is for these issues to be investigated so that we can make sure it's not something that's going to result in a complication later or a miscarriage later. And the other part of it, I think, is that if you know that you have this complication, then you can make different decisions. You're not running, you're not doing things where you're pounding, you're not doing heavy lifting because those are things that can increase the bleeding, right? But if you don't know, then you can miscarry because you were ignorant of the fact that something was wrong. And so for her, not only did they find that, but they also found that she had a fibroid and that a cyst burst. So all of a sudden now everyone's like, oh, okay, you can come in and do your first appointment. It shouldn't have taken that for you to take her issues seriously. And so I realized that when we have the data, it helps to hold providers accountable. And it also gives women confidence. So the lady where we caught the hemorrhage while she was in the hospital, the she had hemorrhaged her first pregnancy, and that's why she came to us. And she was just wanting more eyes on her. She has her baby. She's talked to them about her concern about hemorrhaging, and they ignored her. Her blood pressure was low. When she tried to stand up, she couldn't take a step. So they gave her a catheter. They put a catheter inside of her and was like, well, instead of going to the bathroom, just use you just don't have to get up now. And so putting band-aids on the issue, right? You should not have a baby and then be unable to walk. That's a red flag, right? So she couldn't walk. And so I said, look, you've got to ask them to recheck your hemoglobin. So she asked them and they were like, there's no need to recheck, you're fine. So she's not a person who would normally, rock the boat. She's just like, but she called me and she said, you know what, Katherine, I realized this is my boat. And my baby depends on me protecting this boat. And so I'm going to ask for the things that I need because I realize that it could literally be life or death if I don't. So she demanded that they do a hemoglobin check. Her hemoglobin, by the time they finally checked it, was 5.9. And she started out before she had her baby at about a 14. See how much blood she lost while they were wasting time? But she was dead set on getting it checked because on her device she could see her stress instead of going down following delivery was going up. Her resting heart rate instead of going down was going up. Her actual heart rate instead of being low was high. Her blood pressure instead of being normal was low. So she had the numbers. She refused to leave until they looked into it. All of a sudden, it was, oh my God, we're gonna give you a transfusion. We are so sorry. We should have looked into it. When they were previously forcing her to sign discharge papers. And so the display of data, people being able to see, no, it's not my imagination. This is not normal. My body is significantly different than it was before. It empowers women in a way that I have never seen before. And it is the most beautiful thing. And then you talk about pregnancy detection. I had people call because they're like, oh, can you help me get pregnant? Can you help me get pregnant? I said, it's a trick of society to think that you have a problem getting pregnant. The creator of the earth, of the world, has placed inside of you the ability to create life. And so, what I need you to do before you come to me is get back to that belief, right? The reason when people think about teenagers getting pregnant, because they're having sex all the time and they're not worried about not getting pregnant. They're worried about getting pregnant, right? And so then we have women on the other end of the spectrum who are now tracking everything and they're like, okay, we're gonna have sex on day 7, we're gonna have sex on day 9, we're gonna have sex on day. It becomes it's no longer enjoyable. They're tracking so much that they're not able to enjoy it. And then they're let down because they feel like they're not able to reproduce. Like it does something to your body. And so when they call me, I just remind them, I tell them, no, actually, I'm not going to take you. Unless you have some type of a medical issue that would actually stop you from getting pregnant, I'm going to need you to have unprotected sex, take your prenatal vitamins with iron, and then call me back in about 3 months. And if you're not pregnant at that time, then we'll talk. And when I tell you, once they get that, once they realize my body was designed to do this, right? And all I have to do, sleep well, hydrate well, make sure I'm moving, make good health conscious decisions about what you're putting into your mouth. It becomes a whole lot easier. And so over the last 3 months, I've had 3 ladies who have called me and been like, guess what? I'm like, I know you're pregnant. I don't even need a watch for that, right? Because all you have to do is really get back to the core belief that your body was designed to do this. And I think that when we get to the end of pregnancy, that's the problem too. Doubt is cast. People think I'm going to have a C-section. I need to go ahead and induce because something can go wrong after this time period. And it's like, we can't use research to scare ourselves out of the fact that we were designed to do this. We need to start having more faith in our bodies, more faith in ourselves. I love when you said earlier about women being the expert of their bodies. Yes, we are going to a doctor who is an expert in their field. We should be the experts of our bodies. And when two experts come together, that's when you have the best outcome. I heard this OB say that the other day, who's a great, excellent OB. And when she said that, I was like, that's what it is. That's what people need to understand. You are the expert of your body. You have more control than you think. And if you don't give your doctor all of the information, then they're making a decision based off of other people that they've seen before. The doctor who told me you're Black, you live most of your, I've seen patients like you before. No, you've never seen a patient like me before because this patient's blood pressure is low. This patient makes good health decisions. This patient hydrates well. I'm not who you think you're seeing, but because you see me through that lens, that's where the problem starts. And so if you have a provider who is doing that, then you have to bring the data. And then if they still don't change their mind, you go to another provider because that's the only way we're going to avoid this death trap of dying of heart disease when we're 60, 70, 80 years old. It should not be. It should not be when we can make decisions every day that puts our heart in a better position, in a better condition to help us live the best quality life possible. I worked in the hospital. So outside of this, I worked in the hospital with patients with brain injury, spinal cord injury, and stroke. And most of the time, the patients who had the stroke were like, the signs were there. I had a mini stroke and I didn't change my lifestyle. I should have stopped a long time ago. They're in now for an amputation. And they're like, man, I wish I had changed my sometimes it's just accountability. It's somebody saying, okay, you know you're supposed to be doing this. Your blood sugar levels are 300 today. What did you eat? What can we change? There's something called a glycemic index. And I love that because sometimes people just think, okay, I can stop eating white potatoes, white pasta, white rice. I stop eating candy. I stop eating cakes. It's not just about that. There are natural foods that cause your blood sugar to spike. And so if we all just use the glycemic index chart, then we can see what's really causing my blood sugar to go up. If you have a monitor, you can see. So start with the list, but then see, okay, well, what actually applies to me? I met a guy who is a type 1 diabetic, meaning that, he doesn't have issue with the blood, his pancreas is just not doing what it's supposed to do. And he looked at the glycemic index chart and everything that they said would spike his sugar did not. It actually dropped it. And he went unconscious to a coma. And then he realized, man, no, it's about choosing the foods that are right for me. And so I think that for me, the biggest thing is helping women understand if you learn your body, then you can trust it, protect it, and prepare it for every phase of womanhood. But if you shortcut that process, then you are handing over control to someone who sees thousands of patients a year. And then you wonder why you're misdiagnosed, why something bad happens. It's because no one taught you to know you. And so that's what I like to do. At the end of the day, I love the watch. But what I love most about the watch is that it connects us to the women. And then I can meet them where they are, educate them about what's right for them. And then they show up to their provider empowered. The woman who I told you that she was having the bleeding, she went today to pay for an ultrasound because her doctor did not answer the phone last night at 10 and all the way up until noon today, did not return her phone call, did not look at the images that she sent with the bloody pads, with the blood that was in the toilet. It's like, they have other things to do. And so we have to start showing women you have other resources. You need $77 to pay for this ultrasound. I'm going to give it to you for your peace of mind, for you to know that you haven't lost your baby. It's worth it. We are worth it. But we watch videos. I watched a video of an OB who had the same thing happen. Week 8 of her pregnancy, she gushed blood. She called her friend and said, "Hey, can you do an ultrasound for me?" She's an OB. So, of course, her friend's going to do an ultrasound for her. We don't have access to those resources. So, we've got to start saving for it. Whenever guys say, "What can I do for the maternal health crisis? What can I do to help position my baby's mom to be in the best place possible?" Save up your money. Because when they say she has to go home because it's $17,000 for her to stay for another week, you have that $17,000 on hand, or you borrowed it, or you got people who are going to contribute to it so that she can get the best care possible. We cannot let the limitations of insurance impact our health outcomes in a negative way. And so I just feel like, though, if people knew that, then they could be more prepared. We all want pregnancy to be a healthy journey. And for the majority of people who monitor with Operation M.I.S.T, we've monitored at this point about 120 women. About 7 or 8 of them have had complications that we had to catch. We caught them early, and then they went away, right? You catch the complication early, you make the lifestyle modification, you continue to monitor the data, you have a good outcome. And so, for the most part, if you are, if you have the resources, you have the data, you make the decisions, the good choices, and you have a great team, we have good outcomes, right? The problem is that people don't have all four. And as a community, we just have to restore that. And we are the healthcare system. So where people are like, doctors are bad, whatever. No, no, we are the healthcare system. And so we can fix it. We can fix it.
And you are so correct about that. It goes to show, and I'm on the administrative side, and I say to people all the time, each of us are different. A doctor sees 100 patients a day, right? 100 of those patients might present with the same diagnosis, but the prognosis is different, and each of us are different. So you are so correct in that we need to take ownership of our bodies. We need to take ownership of the most important thing that we have that belongs to us, and that's our voice. If each of us was to use our voice to actually talk about the things that happen that shouldn't have happened, my, I mean, you know what I'm saying? Like, just imagine if we're all speaking up, what this world would be. I mean, and for those of us that, don't speak up and, because they feel like, okay, well, I don't really have nothing to say, or they're not going to listen to me, find you a partner. It's called accountability. Found you a partner that will either help you by doing it with you, not for you. When you take a handout, that's a no-no. But find someone that's willing to, make you accountable, be accountable with you, say, you know what, you ain't got to walk this road alone. I can walk this road with you. But we each of us, like I stated earlier, each of us are stakeholders. We each have a role to play. We each need to step up to the plate and hit a home run, basically out the
Mm.
park, so that we no longer are sitting around complaining about the healthcare system or the doctors. We're actually taking our own health, each of us, into our own hands and making it. And for those women that are of the childbearing age, I know that is difficult. I mean, we're on some really heavy times, especially with the overturn of Roe versus Wade. But you can still have a healthy baby. Don't let that frighten you. Don't let that scare you. There are still resources that you can reach out to, that you can find, that will actually help you with, with having a healthy baby, for those of you that are in the childbearing age. And if you have insurance, find out if your insurance covers you getting a watch or you getting a smart app so you can have the Operation M.I.S.T. If your insurance company says, well, no, we don't do it, then call around and see. There are tons of places that will give you a scholarship to get the device so that you can have it, so that you can deliver a healthy baby. That's not working for you. If you're working and you have an FSA, use your FSA, get the doctor to write you a prescription stating that you need to have this device that will help you with having a healthy baby. Take that prescription that you have, purchase the product and submit it to your FSA carrier. So there are all different kinds of ways that we can make sure that we are having healthy babies. Dr. Sylvester, you said it right. It's like we have resources, but we don't know where those resources are. We don't know how to get in touch with those resources. So I encourage everyone, every woman, especially those that are of the childbearing age, consider before, consider during, and consider after. And before I close out, I do want to actually say something to you. I'm looking forward to the next conversation that you and I have. Because of course I'm going to have you back, but I do want to say something else. You mentioned something that so often gets lost, right? And that's our dads.
Yes.
Our dads are a big part of the pregnancy process. Yeah, there are some dads that don't want to have anything to do with it or just walk away or whatever. That's a totally different, that's a subject and a conversation for a different day that we're not going to talk about. But for those dads that are there with the moms, that are loving the moms, that are looking forward to the babies, thank you, right? Continue to be that arm for them. Continue to love them. Continue to, when they go to the doctor, because guys, sometimes women go to the doctor and the doctor will tell them one thing, and when you show up with them, they'll change their tune. Continue to go to the doctor with them. Continue to ask those questions. Be that one that they need to have actually there with them, because we love you for it. We really, really do love you for taking the time with the mom, with the baby, having that family atmosphere. So thank you so much from every woman, especially me. Thank you for being that rock in that hard spot that so often, you have to be. But I thank you. Dr. Katherine Sylvester. Thank you, my dear. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Like I said, you brought it real, and that's what we need. We have to stop. We just have to stop baby stepping it, right? Nobody's gonna get it if we continue to, just brush over things and just say things and just without any meaning. No one's going to be able to do that. No one. We're not gonna get better, right? We need healthy babies. Healthy babies are our future, right? What we do, we don't have healthy babies. Right? Where's our future? Right? I'm trying to leave a legacy here. Who's gonna have my legacy if there's no babies? Right? You're trying to build a legacy. Who's gonna benefit from that legacy if we don't have healthy babies? We need those babies. And we want something, we need the moms. Right?
Yes. Yes.
So
Well, thank
I thank
you.
you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Yes, and thank you for all that you do and for all your selflessness in this process. We cannot amplify our voices if someone's not willing to let us be on their platform. And so, thank you not only for believing in Operation Mist and in me, but for all of the conversations you've had before that are opening the eyes of women to the power that they hold. Because I believe that once that is restored, we will fly out of this crisis victorious. I really believe that. So thank
Yeah.
you.
Thank you. And you have the rest of a very beautiful day.
Thank you. You too.